Hey, good evening, everybody. We are talking about school phobia this evening. I'm Amanda Dixon, and my co-partner with me is Michael Camargo. So we're just going to dive right in. We are going to focus on how school phobia gets in the way of your child's obviously ability to attend school. First, I want to start out with a statistic that says between 2 and 5% of school-age children experience school refusal, which is when a child has difficulty attending school or refuses to go. Sure, you can imagine, right, how, especially if you've experienced this, how challenging that makes the ability to be able to kind of go through routine, get your kid to school, and have them attend for the full day. Really a stressful situation for families to be in, and obviously wanting to help through tonight's talk to cover some information around what school phobia looks like. What are we looking for, right? Talking also about what do we do then if we're encountering school phobia for kids. So children with school phobia may obviously refuse to go to school, might create excuses for not going, right? So may come up with a list from A to Z of reasons for why they can't go. Miss school for unexplained reasons, right? So start missing, and parents or caregivers inadvertently falling into that trap of allowing them potentially to stay home, depending on what the circumstances are. Maybe the parent, or caregiver is tired of putting up a fight around trying to hold that boundary really firmly. And so kids starting to miss school for unexplained reasons. And school districts often obviously really looking for reasons for why kids are missing. So if there's absences, wanting doctor's notes or some substantial reason for why that's happening. Which leads me to the next part is like kids often who fall into this category, who start struggling with school phobia, often are sometimes experiencing physical symptoms, right? So no, it may not be illness in the sense of having a cold, but sort of what their system is creating are things like headaches, stomach aches, nausea, dizziness, and those things, especially being present on school days, right? So what we'll sometimes see is a pattern of kids where during the week, these symptoms are coming up full force. Then on the weekend, we don't really see those symptoms emerging quite as much. So kids really experiencing these things, and then kind of going back to that point of parents and caregivers sometimes inadvertently falling into like, well, is my kid actually like genuinely sick kind of with a cold, or these symptoms of a cold coming on? Are they not? What do I do with this? And really genuinely oftentimes not knowing what to do with that then. Even if it is, right, school phobia in this way that sort of the anxiety is coming up and we see these symptoms, sometimes also caregivers not knowing what to do with that information, right, if it is anxiety based. So we will talk a bit about how to help support obviously your kid then, and if they are coming up and reporting these symptoms, especially on school days, how do you navigate that? Because sometimes, I'm a parent myself, Mike is a parent, this idea of like, how do you get the kid to do the thing, right? Sometimes we just need the kid to do the thing, and it's hard, sometimes really hard to be able to make that happen.
I think one thing to consider too, we're going to talk a lot about anxiety and behavior, but also considering like, are there difficulties with academics, right? So are the academics difficult? Is it reading? Is it writing? Is it math? Difficulties with social skills that may be preventing, is the child embarrassed about something um, that may be preventing them from wanting to go to school and may kind of make them, motivate them to want to stay home. So it may not necessarily be a behavior as such, it may be a skill deficit that needs to be addressed separately. And you can work with your staff in the school to kind of either A, identify it, and B, address it.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking a bit about that, sort of in the next few slides, right? Not wanting to, yeah, just assume sort of this is behavioral. Oftentimes, what I always like to say is even outside of school phobia, behaviors speak volumes, right? Whether it be school phobia whether it be other behaviors that are happening, it's often an indicator for people, us as adults as well, that our systems are out of whack somehow. Something is sort of wrong on a deeper level. And some of those things, right, that can cause school phobia are, we want to think about transitions, changes, losses, right? So starting school for the first time, changing schools, returning to school after a long absence. That's a big one for kids often, because there's those questions around getting back into the swing of things. Or, kids are going to notice that I've been gone for a really long time. They might have questions about why I was gone, and I don't want to answer, I don't know what to answer. Fear of bullying, right? So much like Mike was mentioning, right? Are there things kind of going on at school with peers or with other kids that, like, as adults, as caregivers and as teachers for that kid, aren't privy to? Kids can be really sort of on the sly about how bullying happens sometimes. And if our child who has school phobia or is developing school phobia isn't sharing that with us or isn't comfortable sharing that with us, that can very much be sort of a catalyst then for wanting to stay home and experiencing much of those physical symptoms like I already mentioned. Again, we're looking at real transitions, losses, bereavement, having new siblings in the family, so a new baby and a new adoption, traumatic experiences like abuse, car accidents, like, one-time traumas, chronic trauma, really looking at those and the impact that they can have on the desire either to avoid school or honestly really to lean into school, because school to them potentially is a safe place. So right, could go either way. Divorce, violence at home, having an overprotective parent, and sort of the family dynamics of either being an only child or being the youngest child in the family, because sometimes that, going back to that piece of like being the youngest in the family, sometimes caregivers in general, myself as a parent, get tired, right? So by the time it's like your third kid, might just be like, I don't have necessarily the fight to hold up on those routines and what I need my kid to be able to do, and the way that I'm able really to show up for them and support them. And same with being an only child, right? Potentially leaning more into what the kid wants as opposed to what is sort of in their best interest, potentially. Not saying this is the case, obviously, for all only children, but just sort of that constellation of factors being really important to consider and look at.
That can be a really overwhelming list, and so what
Mhm.
the you know the thing to do really is to like seek help, right? So if you're not sure how to address these things, and we really want to address them from an empathetic understanding perspective, seeing the behavior as not something the child's doing just because they want to do it, but that they're actually communicating a real fear. Doesn't mean that they're not going to have to go to school. You're not going to have to put them on the bus with them crying. But what can we do to kind of alleviate, those fears, whether it be talk therapy, whether it be a sticker chart or a reward chart for going to school. We're going to talk about a few other things, but I think that it's a huge list, and that list can be the ways in which we address it and approach it can be very different, right? The way that you address bullying is going to look very different from the way that you address bereavement or a new baby in the family. Um, but there are, seeking professional help, even on a short-term basis, can be very helpful to come up with ideas on how to make this transition better, and also how to give some strategies to you, to the kid, to cope with that fear of going to school. And perhaps there's things that your child is not telling you that maybe they will tell somebody else that can be addressed, at the school level, or at the, or at home, depending on what's divulged.
Absolutely. And just to go off that too, I think the inclusion of the school system in these kinds of situations is paramount, right? Letting the school know that you're struggling potentially with school avoidance at the first sort of start of that potential wave, because the school is going to also be able to help work with you as a family and as a caregiver to try and also, aside from a professional sort of mental health support, to really work as a team, to really try to support this kid to get back to school in a helpful way. So really thinking also about, what might be beneath the school related anxiety. Like I said, behavior speaks volumes to me, right? There's something usually underneath that process of like what, what's going on for kids. And so some of the other things that we want to look at is like, really, potentially having a fear of failure, really a perfectionist type personality, how that gets in the way of not being able to get it right at school. That may impact then the desire to want to go to school, because if your kid is feeling like, I'm never going to get this right, or I'm constantly coming up on, challenges that I just don't feel equipped to handle, right? Academically, socially, there can be this pulling back then to be like, well, I can't do this anymore. Increase in academic struggles, which Mike already mentioned. We've talked about bullying, problems with peers. So not even meeting and I think it's important to make this point here. Even if it doesn't meet the level of bullying, right? Even just being teased occasionally, can be enough, especially for certain kids, to just feel like this is too much. This isn't safe. I don't like how this feels. And that can kind of be a slippery slope into then not wanting to go to school. This is a big one that I hear a lot from kids, and my kids included, over the years as they've gotten kind of when they were younger. But problems or anxieties over using the bathroom in the public schools. Sometimes I hear, different teachers or different environments in the school having certain rules over when the bathroom can be used, how long you can be in there. And I think any additional anxiety, sometimes it can be added to going to the bathroom in a school, can be really detrimental to kids. And so really being able to have that conversation, if it feels like your kid is sharing like, hey, it's hard for me to go to the bathroom at school, I feel rushed, I feel like everybody is paying attention to kind of what I'm doing. Is there a way, again, to include the school in the conversation around that? Because especially in the earlier grades, like kindergarten and first grade, we absolutely don't want this to create any kind of challenges with toileting across the board, right? So that may be coming up in school and creating anxiety. We don't want that to go even further as far as like really struggling with using the bathroom as a whole. Perceived meanness of the teacher. I've definitely heard this a lot from kids as well. And, so kids sort of, obviously in general, right, kids needing a good attachment and a good connection with an adult, a safe adult figure. And sometimes kids and teachers not being a good match, not saying the teacher is overly punitive or punishing, but the kid is picking up on something that kind of feels either overwhelming for them, doesn't feel comforting, doesn't align with what their needs are relationally. And that's a big one that can really make or break kind of this situation where kids will really avoid going, because it just feels like when we're handing our kids off to people at school, right, to teachers, I think our hope obviously as caregivers is that we're handing them off to somebody who can be kind of a replacement figure for us. And if our kids aren't necessarily feeling some of that similarity, granted, we all have, personality differences, temperament differences, then that's going to be an added uphill battle. And so the awareness of that, for our kids, hopefully, if they're willing to share that or have a sense of what that's looking like, we're able to, in some ways, as caregivers, have some of those those conversations with the teachers to say, hey, like, would it be possible, like, for you to spend like some additional like 5-minute one-on-one time occasionally to just touch base with my kid. If there's any build-ins that we can make to try to help support that relationship. And sometimes there aren't, obviously, like teachers are overworked and have a lot going on, of course. And so, but just trying to, going back to that point of including teachers and mental health professionals sort of in these conversations as this behavior increases and makes it really challenging for kids to attend school. Aside from bullying in school, right, or being picked on in school, now we also obviously have the addition of social media to not only having to potentially deal with that when in school, but then also when out of school, right? So just this continuous potential for being overwhelmed by peers in an unhealthy way. And threats of physical harm, right? So if from those bullies or from other kids in school, they're threatening your kid, and so that obviously may result in not wanting to attend. So what do we do? Kind of like we've talked about, I mean, really trying to open up that line of communication between you and your kid to talk about why they don't want to go to school. What are the things that are getting in the way of the ability to do that? Really thinking about, with them, considering all the possibilities of why they might not be able to go. Really being able to be sympathetic and supportive, and understanding why they're upset and why this is a barrier or becoming a hurdle for them. The more open and supportive we can be in that process, the more likely they are to potentially open up to us and feel comfortable enough to share some of the things that are really getting in the way. So, I think also helpful to talk to kids about the longer that they stay home, the more difficult their eventual return will be, right? So really talking about, how they really aren't actually sick, right? They're sort of the feelings that they're experiencing are likely due to their anxiety. And talking about some of the concerns, right, that may come out of missing school for an extended period of time. Reduction in grades, more homework to follow up on, more classwork to follow up on, severed kind of, or, severed relationships with teachers because they haven't been in school for a while. And so really leaning into and acknowledging that you understand your child's concerns, but really working on insisting their immediate return to school. So, really also leaning into letting your child know that school attendance is required by law. The child will likely continue to try to put pressure on you as a caregiver to stay home, because this is coming from a place of fear and coming from a place of bigger, harder feelings likely. And so really focusing on trying to get them back, like we talked about, working as a team with the teachers, mental health professionals, school nurse, principal, whoever you can pull in to try to help support your kid to feel as supported as they can be in that process. So like I mentioned, really discussing the avoidance with everybody, keeping everybody in the loop. If you're noticing those physical manifestations come up, like we talked about, the headaches, the nausea, the dizziness, really trying to not minimize, we still want to take their physical complaints seriously, but trying to keep those conversations to a minimum, right? As far as like, okay, going to acknowledge that you have a stomach ache, you're not, it's hard for you when you have a stomach ache, and keeping it moving forward, right? Not necessarily kind of leaning too much into the physical symptoms, but acknowledging like, okay, yeah, you have a headache. That might be your anxiety talking. Can we name it? Can we name what we think it is, right? Because if we think it's anxiety, that is going to help in the context then of also them being able to be like, you know what? Okay, like I have a stomach ache. Maybe that's my anxiety. It still may not, right? It's probably not going to impact their desire to want to go to school, but it's helping, right? It's helping with sort of this language around their mental health and how that can manifest physically, for sure. And then working on really like kind of titrating the process back to school, right? So if we're getting them back into the swing of things after missing for a number of days, right? We may want to, and this is again a great sort of plan to work on with the teachers at the school or people at the school, is like, is there a way that we can kind of slowly reintroduce school as opposed to it being a kind of diving back in? And this is really going to be kid specific as far as what we think would work best for them. For some kids, diving back in is the best approach. For some kids, a slower, more built up approach is better for them. And so really kind of gauging what feels like is going to be the most helpful for this specific kid.
So some other things that we'd want to be aware of, and it does seem counterintuitive, but we want to be careful not to overvalidate anxiety. It really can have the effect of reinforcing, like, I should feel this way. Obviously, we want to make sure that the child is safe, right? So if there are concerns about bullying, if there's concerns about, the teacher being mean, at first we really want to take these seriously, reaching out to the principal, perhaps arranging a meeting with the teacher. Um, but if it's something that's kind of run of the mill, and or it seems like it is something that's unlikely to happen, um our gut would be to want to make our children feel better. It's like, oh, it's going to be okay, and comfort them and say, I understand why you feel this way. But that act alone can be very reinforcing to this behavior. And so we really kind of want to, as long as we can be sure that, or reasonably sure that, the child is safe, we don't want to be giving into this, right? We want to let them know you're safe. Schools are one of the safest, if not the safest place to be in your community. You're safe. It's going to be okay. And, reassuring them, I will see you when you get home from school or when I get home from work. Um, developing that relationship with the teacher, so that you can kind of both be on the same page. But we really want to be mindful of not over attending to this school phobia, because again, it'll just go on and on. We may want to advocate for school-based counseling. Many schools now, if a child has a 504 or an IEP, counseling services can be a part of those, um, a part of a 504 or an IEP, easily, right? And if it's based on, if it's related to school and school success, there's a good argument to be made that, school-based counseling is appropriate. Some schools offer school-based counseling for kids that don't have 504s or IEPs. Uh, it's a short term, perhaps 6 weeks, 12 weeks, for them to address a specific goal. You may also want to encourage your child to participate in school-based activities, just to increase their positive associations with school. Um, Many sports teams, you can't participate in sports if your grades are falling, or you're not attending school. So really kind of encouraging them, or finding something that they're interested in, whether it be before or after school club, that is going to kind of help motivate them to get to school. And then finally, some sort of reward. I mean, it seems very basic, but that could be a very simple solution to addressing some school phobias, particularly for younger kids. Right? Oftentimes, separation anxiety, which is a very normal, natural part of child development, going off to school, big new school, big bus, can be very scary. Um, you know, Early on, introducing a reward system so that they can kind of get over this hump. The research is very clear in terms of attendance, that if you start to show attendance difficulties in kindergarten, first grade, those attendance issues, they can kind of remain consistent throughout a child's school career. So very early on, wanting to address those things, get your child to go to school, finding strategies. Maybe driving them in, if you can, is the better choice. Maybe even if you can drive them in, putting them on the bus is the better choice. Experiment and try different strategies to see what's going to help with allowing that separation to occur more easily, but also promoting their motivation, or improving their motivation to attend school. And it may simply be like, hey, if you go to school all 5 days, I'm going to take you out to your favorite restaurant, or you get to pick the meal that we have on Friday. Um, so something as simple as that could be helpful in some situations.
Also being able to commit to being extra firm on school mornings. So oftentimes this is when kids will complain most about their symptoms, because it's like, okay, they had, the evening before after school, slept, and now getting up to, like, oh my gosh, have to confront kind of the fear of getting back to school. Like I already talked about, if the anxieties are severe, we may want to talk about kind of step-by-step process of return to school. Again, that's also going to be very child dependent as far as what their needs are. And like we've already mentioned multiple times, is being able to request the help from the school staff, right? So the more, again, a team approach that we can have to helping kids get back to school, the better off we'll be. I think there's one thing that we really don't want to see happen is where parents and caregivers feel like they're just an island out there trying to figure this out all on their own, and that can get really, really overwhelming. So we can also, if bullying or an unreasonable teacher is the cause of your child's anxiety, we can talk to the teacher. So it really is about communication and connection with the school and the school district. If they do stay home, right, if you do make that decision to keep them home, being sure that they're safe and comfortable, but don't give them any special treatment, right? It shouldn't feel like a vacation. It should just feel like a day home, nothing exciting to do. Going to school could actually be more exciting potentially. And helping your child develop independence by encouraging activities with other kids outside the home. So not only like going to school, but like in other avenues as well. Can we get them involved in different things so that they're like kind of out of the house, they're engaging, they're doing things? Because, I think one of the sayings that I always think of is like energy kind of begets energy. So like once we start getting moving, and I know this is true for myself, once we start moving and doing things, I kind of want to do more things and taking more things on, or like involved in more things, because it just sort of has that feel to it of kind of pulling you along. So again, if they're involved in other activities that aren't school-based, that's going to help increase that motivation to potentially want to go to school. Again, depending on what the factors are that are impacting their desire to not go to school.
And
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll say, and lastly, really, when we are saying goodbye, right? So if it is a difficulty of separating, we talked about this last time. Having a short but consistent goodbye routine, right? You don't want to linger. You want to have, and you want it to be predictable, right? And it's okay to plan it with them. It's good. I mean, it's encouraged. Get their input. Like, what would this look like? My youngest son, we have a routine. I strap him into his school bus, and I give him a kiss, and we read The Kissing Hand by Audrey Penn, which is a wonderful book about saying goodbye. I kiss his hand, he kisses my hand. I leave, and then when I'm leaving, I'm waving goodbye to, and it's every day. It's the same thing. Earlier in his school year, I had to give him stickers. Right, we had a reward system in place for him because he was really upset. And that those stickers eventually went from a reward chart to basically me putting stickers onto him to now I say, do you want stickers or not? And oftentimes he's like, no, I don't want stickers. But the hug and the kiss and the kissing hand are things that are very consistent. And it's very quick. It's very quick. It's predictable. He's kind of in charge of it. And it just really helps to make that goodbye easier. Now, whether you're dropping your kid off or putting them on the bus, I mean, they may be upset, especially in the beginning. And that's okay. If it helps you to feel better about it, talk to the bus driver, call the school staff. How long was my kid upset for? More often than not, it's a very brief period of time. Even for kids that are upset for prolonged periods of time, like multiple days, weeks, oftentimes on a day-to-day basis, their time of being upset is very, very short, right? So as a parent, you can kind of feel rest assured that, yes, my kid is very upset, but within a matter of minutes, they're calm. And so to me, that says that's a behavioral thing, right? That's them trying to say, don't leave me, I want to stay with you. And of course they want to stay with you. But the fact that they can calm themselves so quickly, is very promising. So if that's the case, that's very typical. We want to make sure that we're not like hindering that progress by, oh, well, oh, I feel bad. So let me try to do something different. Let me drive them to school. If we're changing up the routine, whatever your routine is cool. Just do it consistently. And so, we don't want to be messing with it because then now the kid, it's not predictable, and and lack of predictability is anxiety provoking. And so you just kind of have to get over the hump of this is new, this is challenging, but you find what works for you best and what works for them best, and just stick with it. And again, talking to school staff, getting ideas from other parents, can seeing how long they're upset can all be ways of helping you kind of be motivated and willing to like push through and see it to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's important is knowing that you're not alone, right? In this process, that a lot of kids often do sort of struggle with this from time to time. And so, yeah, being able to have, like I've mentioned, a team, having other parents who, who have also maybe experienced similar things with their kids can be really, really beneficial.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we have for you tonight. We hope that it was helpful. Our next talk, I believe, is December 4th, and we're going to be talking about social media use. So that's going to be the link is going to be posted to the school's website. That'll be Wednesday, December 4th at 6:30 for the live presentation, or there will be a video recording of it as well posted at some time after then.
All right. We thank you for watching the video, and we hope to see you sometime soon.
Take care.